Welcome back to GBNAmerica, where I'm very excited to be talking to Bryan Lanza, who is one of the advisors to Trump 24 and knows the inside story of what's going on in the campaign with just a few days to go. So, Bryan, do you view yourself as being despicable or as garbage?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I proudly wear the label as deplorable. I think Hillary Clinton lamed us just right back in 2016, and garbage is just an extension of how the Democratic Party, feels about the American voters. So, but for me, deplorable is the word that I wear with pride.
But you see, I think it's really interesting and shows a problem not just in America but in other countries, that in the UK, people who voted for Brexit were accused of being stupid and racist, and that there is an intellectual liberal elite who just look down on voters. And this seems to me quite a serious problem for democracy. It's not just bad manners, it's worse than that.
Yeah, listen, I think that's what you're seeing in the U.S. and that's what you're probably seeing in governments all across the world. The political class is not helping the vast majority of at least Americans or even of Europeans. And they feel out of touch, they feel disconnected, and they feel left behind. Whereas the population here in Washington, D.C. continues to get richer and richer every day. So yeah, there is a disconnection. And I think they're so disconnected that they have no problem insulting the American voters, whether it's telling them that yes, there are weapons of mass destruction, and there weren't. Whether it's telling them yes, you can have universal health care and you can keep your doctor, which they weren't able to, or they can tell them a tax cut is coming, and instead a tax increase took place. There's just a huge disconnection between the political elite here, the economic elite, and the vast majority of the country, and that's what President Trump appeals to. I think one of the best terms that I heard somebody say is, he's the people's sledgehammer. He's the Molotov cocktail that the people can throw at Washington and burn it down and disrupt it so that it could finally start working for them, because for the last 50 years they haven't felt it's been working for them at all.
And he's therefore cutting through to voters, but he terrifies the establishment, and he terrifies the establishment not just always of the left, but sometimes the Republican establishment too.
Listen, we all get scared from time to time whenever President Trump says anything, obviously. But listen, he is who he is. He's almost created his own political party. He's blended in sort of the economic, concerns that the Democrats had with respect to fair trade and free trade, and he's moved that into the Republican Party. But he's also sort of moved the party somewhat, liberal on some of the social positions. I mean, let's take, for example, President Trump, is fully accepting of gay marriage. That's not been an issue, in his administration or his campaign. He also says that, with respect to IVF, that the government should fund that, or the insurance company should front that cost. I mean, that's revolutionary. That is a different Republican Party that's having to appeal to suburban women, that's having to appeal to minority voters, and he's going to where these minority voters are and these young voters are. That's never happened in the Republican Party. I mean, could you imagine Mitt Romney, working behind the counters at McDonald's, or could you imagine John McCain riding a garbage truck? They just don't get it. They're disconnected. They're the political class. They're the political elite, and they look down at everybody else. Donald Trump, doesn't look down at them. He looks straight at them.
And this is where he's so clever, because he has that quality of showmanship, both the McDonald's appearance and the garbage truck. In England, we tend to call it a dustbin cart, but I'll accept garbage truck for the purposes of this discussion. That was just brilliant showmanship, and it captured an insult and turned it into something positive for his campaign.
Yeah, listen, and I think also that's the power of social media. Remember, there wasn't a lot of coverage on mainstream media, but when Trump did that image in social media, it carried fire everywhere. So as you maybe saw it for 25 seconds or 30 seconds on mainstream television, it lived on social media for 24 hours. I mean, it's still being discussed. It's one of the most downloaded images or most viewed the most viewed tweets of the campaign. And there's no better showman. I tell people every time, I said Donald Trump's not only the commander in chief, he will probably go down in history as the best executive producer of his life. He knows how to manage the theatrics, he knows the language to use to capture attention, and he knows the power of images. And that image yesterday was with that trash truck, or the dustbin as you call it, was just as a powerful image, and it was hard to ignore, and the media was forced to cover it. And that's something that he breaks through, that most politicians, they wouldn't think of what to do, and they usually don't break through the way President Trump does.
But
It's a masterful stroke.
is the quid pro quo to that sometimes his language or that of his supporters is a little more inflammatory than is helpful for his campaign? And that's just one of the risks of a charismatic figure.
Yeah, listen, sometimes he's imprecise. I mean, when you're speaking hours and hours to supporters, when you're doing interviews the way he's doing, when you're as accessible as you are, your language from time to time can be imprecise. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes it happens. But, yeah, I tell people here, look at baseball. Baseball is a game of percentages. And if you can get on base 30% of the time, that gets you in the Hall of Fame. That means you're failing 70% of the time. Well, Donald Trump, he tends to hit the targets close to 80% of the time. It just so happens when that 20% that he gets wrong from time to time or that he misses, it just creates another wave that you got to ride.
And he has a feeling for the issues people are concerned about. So I've been reading in the British papers, actually, that migrants are trying to get in as soon as possible because they're worried that President Trump will come back and will make it harder for them. So his message is getting across beyond the shores of the United States, even to the illegal immigrants.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's big. The rhetoric's a big part of his message because if he sort of gives the rhetoric to the illegal aliens, to the criminals who want to come to the United States through the southern border, and they feel they're unwelcome, that forceful rhetoric makes them feel unwelcome. Whereas opposed to you have the opposite, which is Kamala Harris in sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, and trying to make this a sanctuary country. That's why you've had a tremendous growth of illegal immigration over the last 4 years, is because the illegals knew that they could come into the United States with zero consequences because the United States was deemed a sanctuary country at that point. Well, President Trump, his rhetoric has expressed that we're not a sanctuary country. We're a country governed by laws and rules and regulations, and that they don't get to cut the line. There are people, there are proud people who've worked, a significant amount of their lives to come here to the United States. They stood in line, they did it the right way, and those people are welcome with a huge wide open door. But if you're going to cheat, if you're going to lie, you're going to steal the way to get you in here, you're not welcome. And President Trump has made that abundantly clear, and the rhetoric cements that. And the rhetoric's only going to get harder because we've learned one thing over the years, that the rhetoric works.
And the other issue that he's paying a lot of attention to is this simple question of, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And the economic difficulties people face is helpful for him at the moment. And of course, his economic policy was very successful.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time in the modern era that you can compare two presidents' records. You have the economy of Biden-Harris, which Harris is looking to do the second term of that, which the country doesn't want, and you can compare it to President Trump's first term, and it's overwhelming. People were better off during President Trump's first term, and that was abundantly clear. Sure, it got disrupted by COVID, and that was a world tragedy. That wasn't as sort of subject only to the United States. But at the end of the day, President Trump created record unemployment, created record new businesses for almost all ethnic groups. Wages were risen under President Trump's term. And then you look at what happened during the Harris. You've had inflation wipe out, the Biden-Harris, you had inflation wipe out people's savings. They've had to max out their credit cards for just basic goods. I mean, we had the school year start a couple months ago, and the average family, I think nearly 60% of American families had to borrow to pay basic school supplies because of this Harris-Biden economy. So people feel it every day. It might be improving a little bit, but what we've learned over the years in American political history is that voters usually make a decision on the economy in July. And in July and August and September and even most of October, the economy was devastating to the working class, devastating to the paycheck family. And those are the ones that are rebelling against the Biden-Harris administration and are welcome as part of the broader, Donald Trump coalition.
And the things that worry people about Donald Trump relate a lot to his reaction to losing last time round and the feeling that he wouldn't accept the result. Is there still a feeling in the Trump campaign that that result was fiddled, or has that now been accepted?
Nobody's talking about 2020. I think Joe, and the proof. I guess Harris is trying to talk about it, but I think the proof that it didn't work, or at least the conversation of 2020, was Joe Biden's main messaging theme. And ultimately, he dropped out of the race because that message couldn't connect, and he had a bad debate. Harris is losing this race, at least we feel he's losing. The data is showing she's losing this race because she's not focused on the economic and immigration issues that people care about. So 2020 may have been a concern for people back then in 2020, but when they've had 3.5 years of Biden-Harris, when they've had 3.5 years of censorship, when they had 3.5 years of lawfare targeting private citizens, changing the laws to target people, January 6th is a blip on their radar when they see what's taken place in the last 3.5 years.
But Harris has been trying to use this, admittedly with rather hysterical language, suggesting Donald Trump's a fascist and all this sort of stuff. So there must be some element of it that the Democrats still think gets through, at least to motivate their core base.
Well, it definitely motivates their core base, but their core base is not big enough to win an election. So the more, I mean, but that also goes to show that the weakness of Kamala Harris, if she's trying to strengthen her core base 5 days before the election, she clearly has not been able to reconstruct the Joe Biden coalition, which won in 2020, and I think all the data supports that. And you even have some, professional Democratic strategists that are confused. People are looking for an economic message, and she's bringing up this message of fascism. She's bringing up this message of Donald Trump, and his supporters being Hitler. That's not the messaging theme of unity that they were looking for. So, in our view, she clearly has to cement her base. That's why she goes through those issues, the January 6th issues, the democracy issues, which test well among Democrats. But the vast majority of the people want to know what you're going to do for them going forward on the economy, what you're going to do forward with immigration, and she has no answers. And that's what this election's about. Somebody who's providing an economic successful path forward, as opposed to Harris, who just can't answer the basic question of what she would do different than Joe Biden. We know she won't do anything different than Biden. We know she'll continue to bankrupt the American family.
And in terms of foreign policy, where Donald Trump was so successful in his first term, one thing many people are worried about is the relationship with Russia and what might happen to Ukraine. Is there any reassurance you can give me there? As it seems to be very important that a man like Putin must not be able to seem to succeed.
Yeah, listen, I think that's a conversation also for the international community. In 2014, the international community didn't say anything when Vladimir Putin took over Crimea. Donald Trump, came into office. He supplied weapons to the Ukrainians, the weapons that Obama wouldn't provide to him. But at the end of the day, President Trump wants peace. He doesn't. He's made that position abundantly clear. He's willing to sit both parties down and have the conversation. What you have in President Trump is somebody who can have the conversation with both parties. I think Joe Biden is not somebody who can sit down with President Putin, primarily because he doesn't have the cognitive fitness to do these types of things. That's why you haven't seen any real success. Whereas you're going to see President Trump, he's going to be actively involved, and he's going to come up with a solution, a peaceful solution. But we have to be clear of what that looks like. There's no certain circumstances that's going to bring Crimea back under the Ukrainian fold. The international community said goodbye to Crimea in 2014, so you have to go going forward. And I think that's a lesson that President Zelensky has to understand, that there's no circumstance where the American public is going to support military action in Crimea, especially after the international community said nothing about it in 2014.
Well, interestingly, the only person who did say anything about it was our now king, then Prince of Wales, who said that Putin was doing what Germany had done in the 1930s, and he said this in 2014. It was remarkably prophetic, and that they would be back for more. But you're quite right. Nobody who had actual political power seemed to be concerned in 2014, and France and Germany's behaviour was absolutely disgraceful at that point. So you're optimistic that Donald Trump is going to win. Is he going to carry Congress with him, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and therefore be a really powerful president who can get things done?
Listen, in politics, there's only two ways to run. And so I don't know whether I'm optimistic or not, but I know that we're running hard, because you're either running hard or you're running scared. And we're running hard every hour to get to the very end of this Tuesday. We appreciate the data that's coming in with respect to the early voting, and that is a result of running hard. We would love to have the House of Representatives join us. It looks like the U.S. Senate is going to tilt Republican, which is a good thing. But the House of Representatives is a very close race. Gerrymandering has sort of instilled that it's going to be very close to every election cycle. So yes, we'd love to have that mandate. Donald Trump is going. He's now competing for the national vote, and if he wins the national vote, that all but certainly guarantees that we'll gain the House of Representatives. Now, it's not going to be a big margin. It may be a 2 to 3 vote margin, but a win is still a win, and you still have a mandate to go forward, and he'll exercise that mandate.
Well, Bryan, I wish you every success. It's not for me to say how people ought to vote, but I certainly think it's in the interests of global security and of the United Kingdom to have a Trump victory. So I wish you every success in the remaining few days, and thank you so much for joining me in GBNAmerica today.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity.